Welcome friends to today's session of live lectures. For today's session we have with us Dr. Anand Prakash. Dr. Prakash is retired from Department of English from Delhi University, and Dr. Prakash has wrote many books on Shakespeare and literary theory and Indian writing. Friends, today's topic of discussion is Neruda, a poet of commitment. Friends, we would like to tell you, if you have any questions regarding this session, you may call us on our toll-free number in last 10 minutes of this session. For that, please note our toll-free number, which is 1800-110-430. Let's welcome Dr. Prakash and let's start the journey of this poet. We welcome you, Dr. Prakash, and please throw some light on this poet.
Thank you, Disha, and welcome viewers. Our today's discussion, as has been announced, is on the topic Neruda, poet of commitment. And before I begin discussing aspects of his writing and his sensibility, let me explain to you the meaning of commitment as I see it. You know, all writers, all poets, in fact all citizens are committed to something, committed to a cause, committed to an idea, committed to a sense of morality, committed to responsibility. So nobody in this world has that kind of lack of absence of purpose. All of us have some purpose, and to that purpose we are committed. Then why do I use this word for Neruda as the poet of commitment? My view is that unlike many other poets and writers in different languages in India and outside, Neruda is conscious about what he is doing. He cannot, for instance, say like Wordsworth, that literature is, or poetry is, a recollection of images in the past in tranquility. He cannot say that, and it's a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, because for Neruda there is spontaneity, there is an overflow also, but he knows in which direction he is moving. For that reason, and he keeps on reworking, reimagining and examining his own point of view all the time, and this helps him evolve further as a human being, as a sensitive person, as a person who has to write. What about language? Does he show commitment in his language also? It's a question that you might ask. It's a question that I ask from myself. And before I talk about language, let me tell you that none of us in India, or very few of us in India, would be knowing him as the poet of Spanish language. He writes in Spanish, but then he is available to us in India in English translation or the translation in other languages. So that doesn't qualify us to talk authentically about his use of language. But as we read him in English, so we will talk about the English language that has been given to him by the translators. And in English, there is a kind of variation all the time when Neruda is using it in translation, of course. You read a line, it says one thing, but it doesn't just say one thing, it says something else also. And that series of unsaid things, the series of suggested things is so very clear in his writing that one very soon comes to know that this person likes certain things and doesn't like other things, and is quite clear about them. He will not mix. So he will straight away tell us that there is a problem here, and I would like to point out the problem. And if he is writing consciously and at the same time developing and evolving himself, then we might say that the person is living from moment to moment as a poet. Today he writes a poem, then he goes back to it later as it is published, as it is written, and he then writes another poem the next day. So he would have learned from his own language, from his own poem the previous day, and his next poem is going to be a movement in the forward direction. So that way he keeps evolving. So if you have gone over his poetry from the beginning in the 1920s, he started writing, to the 70s when he died, you will realize that at every step, in every year, in every decade, in every short span of time, he had become different from his previous self. This is remarkable. A poet, grows up physically but also mentally. also sensibility wise, also at the level of values that he cherishes and the values that he finds worth discarding. So, this kind of evolution of Neruda is also a subject of interest for us. We do not have the time enough to do justice to all these things, but whatever we can do in this lecture, in this discussion, that we will try to do in the context of his poetic evolution, in the context of his writing and the background that it has. So, I hope you have become somewhat clear about commitment. He is committed to life, he is committed to love, he is committed to an awareness of something that is that makes you uneasy, and that sense of unease also sometimes comes out from his poems. So, he is committed to that. He is an honest person. If he has a fault in himself, he will openly take it as his own fault. He would try to further work on it. He may not be able to overcome everything that is there as a fault in his writing, but then he would show awareness of that in his writing. So, that makes him a poet of commitment. And now, let me make it clear that his commitment is to human life. The commitment is to positive thought. His commitment is to criticizing the wrong things in life. He is a poet of peace, and when he finds peace disturbed in his country, then he will not be happy, and he will make clear his unhappiness through words. And he is so committed, in fact, that he finally became also a supporter of the political cause of the masses. His cause was democracy. His cause was resisting the wrong influences that happen in society under different regimes. So, he became so political, he became so alert that at one point of time he thought of fighting an election for the president of the country. And Neruda is not a political thinker. He would not have any idea about which forces are at work and what strategies they use in order to further their cause. But as a poet, he stood for presidentship of his country. And when he went to the gatherings to talk to people, what would he do? Imagine, he would not talk to them directly about the political situation in the country. He would take out a poem and start reading it. That is Neruda for us. And he is a Spanish poet, but his people, his families earlier, his predecessors, they came from Spain to Chile, which is a Latin American country. And there he was a candidate for the presidentship of Chile, and he would stand before people. He would talk about all the problems that he faced as a poet, and because his poetry was political, therefore it left that kind of impact. And let me tell you, Chile is like India. Chile is not like Europe, that a great leader comes and there are just 2,000 people listening to him. In India, people in millions listen to a person. Right from the time we had our political campaigns before independence and up to now. And in Chile also, I am told that the audiences are as large as 1 million sometimes. And when 1 million people sit before you and they listen to your poetry, then there must be something in the poet. And because his poetry then would appeal to the masses, therefore, also I call him a poet of commitment. So, I hope this short explanation of commitment will serve you in understanding what his poetry is. And in fact, I would like to ask Disha also as to what kind of role commitment might play in poetry. You are a citizen, and you must be reading poems, or you must be hearing songs which are also poetry. So, is there something like commitment in poetry, or I am just being a bit praising what I call commitment?
I think commitment in poetry is more like being honest, and what he is actually, he is honest about his own thoughts. It's very important. So, when one is very honest about his own thoughts, he is going to write that bang on, like that, bang on. So, that maybe that is what is coming into the poem. He is not being very flashy about things, not exaggerating flashiness or making things very rosy or fancy. He is what it is, he is writing it.
And he will be also thinking about the interests of the readers also, the audience.
Yes.
He would like to tell them what they need, what they require.
What they need to know at this point.
What they need to know, what they need to feel also.
Yes, yes.
So, poetry is about thinking, and feeling. And feelings and knowledge, is there some difference?
knowledge is more, I think, head based,
Yes.
and feeling is more when you connect emotions with it. Then I think it becomes very strong.
Mhm.
When knowledge is connected with feeling, it becomes very strong, and then I think you are forced to take action.
Mhm.
With knowledge, you just know you are sitting stagnant, but when it comes feeling, you move certain action to do it.
So, friends, Disha, the anchor, she has hit the nail on the head. This is exactly what is there in poetry. Because the poetry mixes feelings with ideas, makes ideas powerful, and communicates through feeling. If somebody is angry and somebody has angry views, then those views and that anger, they blend, and that is what poetry is for most of us, and for Neruda in particular. So, with this, I go forward. This kind of support that I get intellectually from the anchor here.
Thank you so much.
Let me in the beginning tell you, friends, that he was born in 1904. So, he would have been, if he were alive, he would be today 114 years. He died in 73 in the last century, and he was born in Chile, that country in Latin America, and there is a small town there, a village maybe, it's called Parral. He was born there, and he spent his childhood in a small provincial town of Temuco. This is his background, and one thing that certainly would be seen in his poetry, reflected also, is that he lost his mother right in the beginning. He was just a small kid, and he was brought up by his father, and his father was a strict disciplinarian, and he all the time kept a watch on this child, and it was his responsibility, and sometimes he would tell him a large number of do's and a large number of don'ts, which means that the child would have felt oppressed by the father. If he had a mother, then he would have got some indulgence also, he would have got some love also, but he was bereft of love, he was devoid of love. He could not get that kind of care from his father as he got from would have got from his mother. And one instance of this particular oppression in his case was that when he started writing poetry, like at 12 years he started writing a poem, and his father knew about it, and he said, no poetry here, this is nonsense, do not waste your time here. When you write poetry, then you are taking your interest away from other things. In fact, most of us today also in India would find poetry as a wasting of time. If a father or even a mother sees a child composing a poem and not doing one's homework, what would be their reaction? The reaction would be that he is wasting his time.
Yes, definitely.
So, this is exactly the pain of Neruda, that when he wanted to express himself in poetry and his genuine feelings, and as Disha said, his honest feelings, when he was expressing his honesty through his poems, then his father would say, don't write. And if the parent is all the time sitting next to you and saying don't write, what should Neruda do? So, in fact, he was a very bright child, very smart child, he was very clever. So, at one point of time he thought of changing his name, and when he would publish under another name, and his father would not know. So, initially his name was Naftali Ricardo Reyes Eliezer Besualto. That was his name.
Quite a big name.
Quite a big name, like some names in cities from South India. So, you have your village's name, you have your father's name, you have your grandfather's name, your surname, that is caste, and finally your own name. And that name also comes from a name from among names that associate with gods. So, we have this kind of a thing, and I don't have enough understanding about the background of Chilean culture or Spanish culture, but then I would say that it's a long name, and it tells, in fact, us the entire address of the man, from his name, from his father, and then from his village. Anyway, he didn't take this name for his poetry writing. He became Pablo Neruda. And how does he become Pablo Neruda? Why should he take his name? He must have read a poem, a poem called Paolo and Francesca, and he liked the word Paolo better, and Paolo is very close to Italian. Most of the Italians have their name ending at O. So, he took the name from there, he changed it slightly, called himself Pablo, and there was a 19th century writer whom he liked, and his name was Neruda, and this person was John Neruda, and he was not from his own country, he was from Czechoslovakia, from Czech, and so John Neruda became Pablo Neruda. So, Pablo his own name, and then Neruda got the surname for him. And now, of course, nobody remembers his original name, but everybody talks about his name that he assumed. So his real name was this, but the name that he used for writing poetry was Pablo Neruda. Then, you know, he was studying in the small town that I mentioned, Temuco, and there he went to the school, and one day a lady came to the function, and she was a famous person, and her name was Gabriela Mistral, and she was a poet herself and a Nobel Prize winner. So she was a great poet of the country, and he, as a young man, heard her speech and would have then read his poetry also, and he started writing like her. This is the influence. As a young man of 20, you have met a person who is a big name, in your culture, in your country. So you read her poetry and then start writing like her. And this was an early phase. This was the phase when he was in his 20s, and he started writing love poems. And that great, collection of poems that came out in the 1920s when he was 25. It would be in 1929 or so when he would be 25, and he called it 20 Songs of Love and Despair, and 20 love songs and a song of despair, something like this. So he published it, and imagine how many copies were sold of the book. You can't imagine. I wouldn't have imagined unless I knew. It was 1.5 billion copies.
Such a great number.
Such a great number. So many people bought the copy. He became a household name right at the young age of 25. And even today, now the book is available everywhere on the internet. If you have that kind of knowledge to take it from the internet, take these poems and see how he writes. So he became a great love poet. And love, in his case, is not of the kind that we have in other cultures. His love was very physical. His love was for his country. His love was for the nature that surrounded him. His love was for the waves that he saw in the sea. His love was for the women he met. And when he talked about women, he talked to them, as Disha has said, very honestly. If he felt something, then he would say it. That kind of a thing. So this is the small bit of information that I share with you regarding the person as a poet, and I can then take up a few questions later about this. But then I move to what are called points about his sensibility. Now the problem that I would face while presenting the point of view about Neruda is about his belonging. To which place does he belong? He is a Spanish poet, and Spain is a European country, and he lives in Chile, and Chile has no other language, or maybe have another language, but his language in Chile would be Spanish. So to whom does he hold his loyalty and his attachment? To Spain or to Chile? And a large number of Spanish people have shifted already from Spain, that is to Chile, and they are the Chileans now. So his adherence is to Chilean culture or to the Spanish culture? Now this is a ticklish question, and in fact this would have compelled him to think politically also. Chile was in Latin America. Latin America is a different world altogether. Nobody knew about the existence of America and Latin America for that matter till the end of the 15th century. So in 15th century, this person called Columbus, he sets on a voyage, he comes to America, he thinks it's India. Imagine, he thinks it is India, and therefore he starts calling the inhabitants of Latin America or America in general as Indians. And because they are slightly reddish in color, so they become Red Indians. So it's that kind of a place where Spanish have arrived, then Portuguese have arrived, then French have arrived, later on English and German have arrived in different parts of America. And they have, at that point of time, become very violent. They start exterminating, killing, murdering, slaughtering the original inhabitants of America, and then they settle down. And those people had a language, but that language was not in the written script. They have not developed it at that point of time. So they would use that language in order to communicate with others. When these people came, they would not understand their language initially. Later on, they might have started understanding their language through interaction, but then it was never got printed or never got that kind of shape. And finally, where would the Chilean Spanish person look for inspiration, look for a past? He would go back to his own country, Spanish. So, Spanish background becomes a part of the sensibility of the Chilean poet. So, this person is talking about his language is Spanish. He talks about his country, the country is Spain. His geography is Spanish. His idea of the seas is Spanish. His friends are Spanish, Spanish may be spoken in Argentina. So, his friends are from Argentina. It might be spoken in Colombia. So, his friends are Colombians. And in the last 100 years or so, there have been 6 or 7 great writers who got Nobel Prize from this part of the world. So, one knows that Spanish is a powerful language so far as Chilean and Colombian and other literatures are concerned. So, but the question is to where a person belongs, and Neruda knows that his predecessors, his people who came before him from Spain, they were murderous, they were intolerant, they were violent, and they were not exactly human. So, he would become somewhat self-conscious. He would start thinking of his own language as a language of oppression, a language that replaces another language. So, he would have that sense of guilt, and that sense of guilt in him will out of honesty will make him sensitive. So, he would be in his own time think about these oppressed people around him. If there are women who are suppressed and oppressed, then it will be sympathetic towards them. If there are children who are stopped from working in their own areas of interest, then he will be emotionally attached to those children. If he finds nature in its variegated forms, in its different colorful forms, then he will fall in love with them. If there are armies attacking this country and that country, and he comes to know and he witnesses it happening in front of him, then he would feel bad. And Neruda, being a poet, would not merely use his ideas, he would also use his sense. So, if there is bloodshed, that blood is then spilled on the roads, and then it becomes congealed, and then it starts giving foul smell. So, he will take the smell and he will write about the smell. So, it's that kind of a poet that he is, and finally, he will become a Chilean poet. He will become a Latin American poet. He will start then interacting with the Latin American poets, writers. He will become their friend, and he will become the enemies of those who have created a different kind of culture within his own country. So, this is what I say, and I believe that there is one more point I would make before I come to the end of it, and that I would say that when he makes friends with others, then the same feeling of attachment occurs to him as it occurs in the case of people whom he sympathizes with. So, he becomes very happy and ecstatic talking to people. He becomes a beloved of his friends, and his friends at the same time also start responding to him so well that he has a kind of sense of community, a sense of homeliness in his own country and surroundings. But the problem is that Latin America is surrounded by other countries, by the world as a whole, and he can see as a writer that there are many people here who suffer like those in Africa. There are many people here who suffer like those in France, in Spain. So, he starts having a kind of community feeling for good people all over the world. So, since this series is about world literature, I would say that in the true sense of the word, he is a world poet, because he is able to sympathize with people not just in Chile, not just in Latin America, but in America, in Russia, in Spain, in India. In fact, he is quite popular in India, and a large number of books of his in translation have already become available in Hindi, for instance, and they are published by different publishers, including Sahitya Academy. And he came to India once, and he met people, and he I think in the beginning when he came, then Gandhiji was around, Nehru was around, and he met them. He was a young man, and he then learned quite a few things from Gandhi, and he was a great admirer of Gandhi when he came here, because Gandhi was the apostle of peace, and Neruda also would talk about peace all the time. So, he is a widely travelled person. He sees oppression everywhere, he sees poverty everywhere, he also sees affluence everywhere, he feels happy spots everywhere. So, he is able to show his happiness, show his contentment, show his fulfillment when he sees a happy scene. And you know, he is a poet of love. So if he meets a young woman and if he likes her, and the woman also gets attracted to him, then he would have a love relationship with her. And if he goes to another country and there he meets another woman, then like a true poet, you know, he would be once again befriending that person, and he would write about these things honestly. And there are poems, maybe in the next part of the discussion I tell you about the poems where he says that he had a love for a woman, but then it weakened. And when it weakened, then of course he had to leave her. And he still remembered her when he was in love. He doesn't remember her now, that he is not in love. Maybe in the meantime the woman has gone to another man. So he is talking very honestly about that also, that she was with me, but today she is not with me and I am sad. But then she can't come back, and maybe if she comes back I won't be able to talk to her in the same manner. So this kind of honesty, and this kind of honesty about a woman in Rangoon, a woman in Sri Lanka, a woman in his own country, and not that he was any immoral person, not that he was irresponsible, not that he meant any insult to them, not that he was violent to them. All these things are not there. But as a friend, if you can have, you know, friend, you know, in one category, you can also have friends in another category. So it's that kind of friendship, and he enjoys it, and he brings it, you know, into play in his literary expression. So I've given this kind of you know, picture of the person and his background and the issues that he has regarding politics, democracy, about, you know, where Spain is, whether Spain is also there in his own country or whether it's that Spain. If that Spain has some kind of dictatorship, then Neruda would like to go there to fight that enemy in his own country. So it's that kind of internationalism, that kind of world politics that, you know, he carries within him and his poetry, and we'll talk about it in the next part.
Thank you so much, sir. And we would thank you all for joining us for this part of the lecture. We'll discuss the next part about Neruda in the second half of the lecture, and we'll meet you after a break. Before going on to the break, we would like to tell you, if you have any questions regarding this session, you may call us in the last 10 minutes of this lecture on our toll-free number. For that, please note our toll-free number, which is 1-800-110-430. Meet you after the break. Welcome back, friends, to the second half of the lecture. Before going on to the lecture, we were talking about the poet Neruda, a Spanish poet who wrote political poems basically, and was very committed about his emotions, about writing his poems. Let's welcome Professor Prakash once again, and let's begin with the second half of the lecture and a very interesting life of this poet and the writing of this poet. We welcome you again, sir, and please throw some light on this poet once again.
Thanks, Disha. And friends, welcome back. And now I'll give some examples from his poems. And I've just picked up a few themes on which he wrote. And not that he had the themes first in his mind and then he wrote. He, as an alert person, as a sensitive person, would look around himself, see closely what was happening there. He would respond and react to them, and that response and reaction would be then expressed in his poetry. It's that kind of poetry. So he would not read unnecessarily any philosophical tract, any political tract to understand what is going on around him. He would use his senses, he would use his eyes and ears, and he would understand what phenomena he is faced with. So this kind of a poet, and he has tremendous command over Spanish, and he could take words from different regions of Spain, different regions of Chile. He could pick up the style of certain people and use them. As I said in the beginning, in the first half, that he met this poet when he was young, and he started writing like her. Later on he met other people and he started writing like them, and you can see this series of influences coming his way gradually and regularly, and because of which he was making always experiments. For instance, in his time, there was a poet in England and America. It's an Anglo-American poet called T.S. Eliot. He was his senior, and he and that poet would be contemporaries. That poet was talking about religion, loneliness, death, and all those things. And Neruda, when he started writing, then he would in fact react to this kind of poetry. For instance, that poet, at one point of time, T.S. Eliot, in one of his prose pieces, he said that the modern man is suffering from what can be called dissociation of sensibility. That your sensibility is split. Your ideas and your feelings don't come together. Your sensibility is split. And Eliot said, that this split occurred in the 17th century and it has continued. So therefore, today we are divided men, divided among ourselves, within ourselves. This is what the theory of literature at that time was. And Neruda all the time proves the contrary. He says the feelings and thoughts cannot be separated. You just be honest, you just be sincere, you just be with people who are feeling and who are angry and who don't like injustice, don't like inequality. You be with them mentally. You feel like them, you think like them, and then you write. Eliot was not doing this. Eliot was mainly standing in his own room and he was looking at the world from a distance, and he would not come down to the level of the earth. So you would not find any proper love poems in Eliot at all. There is a famous poem which is called a love song, but the love song is not Eliot's. He says it's of somebody else. So the poem is called Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and then he starts talking like him. And what kind of love poem is that? He says love has been totally reduced to ashes. It doesn't mean anything at all. And he compares an evening with a patient etherized on a table, as if she's in operation theatre. So that kind of person cannot think of love. And Neruda, for him, love is between human beings, and love is something in which people fulfill themselves. Eliot could not imagine this kind of a thing in the modern times, and this person is junior to him, a little more modern, a little more there in the world, and he loves this world. He loves the colors of this world. He loves the wide expanse of this world. And I'll just give one example, and this is about love. And love, in the sense of the body. Love is not only in the sense of ethereal things. There's a thing called platonic love. That you knew somebody in the previous birth, and maybe you have been, searching the friend whom you might have met, with whom you might have just one soul 10,000 years ago. But you are searching, and one day you realize that this is the person whom I loved, and this is called platonic love. Neruda does not care two hoots about platonic love. For him, love is just at the present time, just with the person who agrees to be intimate with you, and he is not bothered about holding back his emotions even about the body. And just see this line. I just tell you this line. He says, I have imprinted with crosses of fire the white atlas of your body. He is talking to the woman, and the woman is visualized as a white atlas, And on this white atlas, that is the body, he is imprinting, he is putting a stamp, imprinting with crosses. And the moment you talk of crosses, you straight away think of Christ. And what kind of a cross Christ bore? He bore his own an instrument of death on his shoulders. That was the cross. He had to carry the cross at a different place where he would be stuck with nails. That's how Christ would be crucified. And this person is using that word. Now the moment he is able to think of Christ, who is a symbol of love all around the world, and people swear by his name and they say I'm in love with Christ, and this person brings in the reference of Christ, the reference of crucifixion, the reference of cross here when he's talking to a woman, and he says, I have imprinted with crosses of fire. Christ was actually killed with, he was stabbed also, and then certain nails were put into his body. That was one kind of a cross, and this person had the cross of fire, and he's talking about his beloved. I have imprinted with crosses of fire the white atlas of your body. And this fire and this violence and this thing is a violence of love, where people don't remember that that they are meeting somebody at a distance, at a cultural distance. They are together and then they become totally free. And the kind of pain and pleasure that one inflicts on the beloved, and the kind of pain and pleasure that the beloved inflicts on the person, it is that which is being caught in these lines. And he is honest, and I think every person, every human being would relate to this kind of poem, because it talks about the acceptance of what is. It doesn't impose a pattern of religion or morality or culture from anywhere, because that morality, that culture, that thing was articulated by somebody at some point of time, and maybe it was honest then. But if it doesn't appeal to him today, then he would of course say, I'll not take the lesson from there, I'll take the lesson from here, from the moment that I'm a part of. And when two people, when he's talking about his beloved like this, then this is how he feels. And when I was reading this, then I because this is a poem from Spain, and the word used was crosses, CROSS, and in the book that I consulted, it was misspelled, it was CROSES. So I went to the dictionary, and the dictionary told me that crosses means some kind of a aeroplane that was named by a French person, and then at the end I saw that it's a Spanish word for crosses. So I thought the second was correct. But then crosses means just put crosses on the body, and the body is the atlas. On the atlas you make a map, and through that map actually you are able to locate yourself. See the breadth of the meaning. When you love a person, when you are together with her, or if you are a woman and you are together with him, at that point of time, in fact, you know where you stand among human beings in society, whether you are the hero, whether you are an equal, or whether you are unequal, whether you are an enemy or whether you are a friend. So you come to know about all these things in the state of love. So love gives you that kind of sense of feeling, and it is this feeling that he expresses, and so well, in half a sentence. I'll read it again. I have imprinted with crosses of fire the white atlas of your body. Think about white. Why white? Well, he thinks that his beloved is pure. And that this purity will in fact further be enhanced, because love is not a bad feeling. So when purity and love, they combine, then a different kind of beauty is born. How do you relate to this poem, Disha?
I think when he said that I imprinted crosses on the white atlas of your body, so I think even the cross is sacred.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes, absolutely.
So he is viewing his beloved in a very pure way. But at the same time there is some pain also, because there are fire crosses.
It can be fire of love. It can be fire of passion.
Yeah, exactly.
And people also have this passion in religion, in religious practices.
Yes.
They become totally one with God. And think of Meera, for instance. Meera talks about her body, and she also talks about God. So Lord Krishna himself, is a person of fire and a person of love. So the inspiration comes like this from him, and he just writes like that. He would not think twice before writing it. He is very spontaneous poet. Though of course at the level of the mind he will be always alert. Even when he is not writing, he will be thinking. But when he writes straight away, and that shows that he has heard about all these great lovers like Lord Krishna, like others, and they are a part of his sensibility.
Yes.
And you are very right in saying that actually the white atlas becomes much more authentic when
Yes.
it comes to come in contact with love.
Yes.
So it's that kind of love, that this person has, and sacredness, as you say, is very correct. Because if it's sacred kind of a thing, then it's human.
Yeah.
Then it should be celebrated. So this is the one line that I have explained. I will take 2 or 3 more examples. I call him in this discussion at this point of time the poet of the body.
Yes.
He is not a poet of the soul. He doesn't bother about soul that way. Because soul is something that people have defined in different terms, and one is not sure as to what exactly it is. But all of us are in the body, and we know what the body is. The second is leaning into the afternoons. In the afternoons, and it's Latin America, it must be very cold during the day. It's near the South Pole. Leaning into the afternoons, I cast my sad nets. Now he's using a metaphor. Sad nets towards your oceanic eyes. Viewers, for your knowledge, I am reading it again, and then I'll ask this question from you. I'll ask this question from myself and from Disha. Leaning into the afternoons, I cast my sad nets towards your oceanic eyes. Just a small sentence. But there is afternoon, the lover and the beloved are together, and he looks into her eyes, and then he is calling a net to catch her in. But how can he catch her? Because her eyes are oceanic.
Yeah.
They contain the whole ocean, the whole ocean of love. So it's very the lover is the poor lover is only confined to one's net, and he's sitting in a corner. And in the net, how much can he catch? How much of water? How much of emotions? How much of pleasure can he catch? Therefore, he is giving this kind of a level of beauty to the woman whom he loves. That her eyes, are containing the entire ocean, and they are oceanic eyes, and he is only casting a net. And that is, and imagine on one side is the ocean. On the other side is the net, and the third side is the afternoon. The simple afternoon, you have had your lunch, and then you are relaxing at home, and then you meet your beloved, and then this is what you see. So the range of his poetry, the suggestiveness, the wide expanse that he is able to bring in, it is that that makes Neruda this kind of a poet. And he is a poet of beauty, he is a poet of, as you said, sacredness, he is a poet of love, he is a poet of all kinds of transcendental feelings, but all the transcendental feeling is in a way confined to the personal life and moment of the poets. So anything you'd like to add?
So I think when he said, I want to catch from the nets from your oceanic eyes, maybe he wants to catch something from her eyes. Your eyes talk a lot.
Yes.
And oceans are very deep, as your eyes are very deep. So I think he wants to catch some emotion, try to find out something which maybe she's not saying. Sorry. Or something like that.
In any case, saying is never enough, because words have their own world, and words are very limited. You see, you say one thing and the other is meant. So words do not carry all the truth that is there in somebody's mind. So therefore, you are very right in saying that the eyes tell more than the words.
Yes.
Because there you see something else also. Maybe something that the person with the eyes also is not able to see.
Even ocean is a metaphor. Like ocean is very deep, has so many things inside it. Still, we have to find so many things from oceans. Every day we're finding, and so the eyes are very deep. So he might want to catch some emotion, want to know something, and as you saying in this sad afternoon.
Why is he sad? That's important. Just guess. My guess is as wrong and as right as can be yours. Why is he sad here? He's actually very fond of sadness. I don't know why. Maybe
I think, sir, it may be a reason that he's so in tune with emotions. So maybe happiness, sadness, it comes very easy to such people. So and since he is a writer, so maybe that's why he's sad in this moment, and he could, find out that.
He also belonged to a country which was going through turmoil. And if a country is in turmoil, then the poet will have sympathy with those who suffer.
Yes.
So he can never take his eyes off from that sad scene. And in fact, in the world, when there is more of inequality, there is more of intolerance, and people are suffering, then a poet it's difficult for a poet to be happy. Only in moments of love can be happy. Otherwise, everybody is sad.
Yes.
इस शहर में परेशान सा क्यों है? हर शख्स इस शहर में परेशान सा क्यों है? So in every country, in every city, all over the world, because of problems that we are not supposed to discuss in a literary area, people are generally sad. They'll be happy only when everybody is equal, when everybody is a potential friend. That thing is not there in Chile at the time. That's why he fought election. Of course, later on, his friend was fighting. So he said, "Okay, in your support, I withdraw my candidature." He said that, and then Allende, who was the chairman, who was elected after I think 6 months or so of the election, Allende's government fell, and there was a mass murder of people in Chile. And people say that Neruda didn't die; he was killed, and after that. So he was such a threat, to the people who were intolerant. So that way, even today, some people say that somebody would have gone and killed him, and that's a big tribute to the man. That the man had to be killed.
Yes.
They could not face him. So like Gandhi, in our own country, yes, man of 79 years is being killed. Why? Because some people would have felt threatened. So if that is the case, then Neruda would remain sad. So I hope you would agree that this person is bound to be sad in a world which is full of inequalities.
Yes.
Only in some moments, when he meets a person whom he likes, then he can be happy and then he can say those things, but he cannot forget his sadness. So let me read it again in this light. Leaning into the afternoons, I cast my sad nets towards your oceanic eyes. So this is what the whole thing is. The entire world seems to be squeezed into these lines.
Yes.
And it's a world which is tumultuous. It's a world which doesn't give us peace, but it's a world which, whenever there is love somewhere, gives us some hope.
Yes.
So he cannot be depressed. He can be sad, but he will not be depressed, because he knows that there is beauty in the world, there is equality in the world in the potential sense, not in the actual sense, and that should keep us going. And there is another example. He is talking this time directly to the woman, and he says, "You only reflect darkness." Now, generally, a lover will not say this to a beloved. All lovers would say to the beloved, "You reflect brightness. You reflect sunshine." But he is an honest person, and he is also, giving some sense of seriousness to darkness. Darkness also can be serious. Darkness also can be beautiful. So this is what he is perhaps saying. You only reflect darkness. My distant female. He cannot meet her. He is not there with her at the moment, but he might have left her behind in another country. And he says, "My distant female." And female is important. How many poets have the courage to call a woman female? But he'll call her a female, and assuming of course that he is a male. So male and female, you cannot leave your gender, your sex, etc. Generally you should, because all of us are equal. But the way people are made in nature, by nature, I think that the best description of a woman is female, and the best description of man is a male. If you give any other word to it, then there are other connotations. So I think he is maintains that kind of purity. So you only reflect darkness, my distant female. From your looks, sometimes the dreadful coast emerges. Sometimes from your looks, the dreadful coast emerges. You go back to the previous line. There it was oceanic eyes. Now once they have been together in the ocean, after that the coast comes. No, it connects so well with, it's from a different poem, but it connects so well. Distant female, from your looks sometimes the dreadful coast emerges. Sea was better, ocean was better, waters were better. The coast is dreadful. Why the coast is dreadful? It is a society, it is a politics, it is a culture. Those things are not giving you any easy time. So you might go back to the ocean, might live there, then come to the coast. In a way, in this example of world literature, this person has shown very clearly that human beings have yet to establish a system and an atmosphere in which we can be as happy as we would be in the ocean. So, this kind of a comment, it's a political comment he is making. That's why I gave this title that he is a poet of commitment, because commitment tells him very clearly that the world in which he lives is split into the water and the earth, and the earth somehow has been spoiled so much that people would like to call it dreadful. So, this is the politics. Even though it's a body, he's talking about the woman, he's talking about darkness, he's talking about the female, and it's very difficult for a modern supposedly gentle person to talk about darkness and beautiful. But then this person is able to. From your look sometimes, and sometimes, not all the time, the dreadful coast emerges. So, he sees the woman, and he sees behind the woman a kind of a reality that she is also suffering by. And the last one from this particular section of the poet of the body, he says, "Ah, woman, I do not know how you could contain me in the earth of your soul." Can anybody talk like this? Earth of your soul. People would say layers of your soul, people would say the spectrum of your soul, the scene in your soul. He says the earth of your soul, in the cross of your arms. See the power of his poetry. Cross is once again Christ.
Yes.
Christ, and Christ was stuck to the cross, and then he could not move away, and he died. But then there is also another kind of a cross, and cross means hugging a man or a woman, and when that cross is made, then of course there is a different kind of experience, and that experience is the experience of living on the earth. It is as solid, it is as real, it is as available to the senses as anything else. So, here we have a poet of the 20th century, and we were discussing this and earlier regarding his death. He didn't die a natural death, but then if he had lived, then he would have continued talking about the earth, talking about the soil, talking about fertility, talking about flowers, talking about colors, and this way body takes him to all these things. So, body is not merely the human body, the body actually is the earth, the body is nature, the body is trees and flowers and streams, and that is what emerges from him. So, then second part, I have time, yes, in another 5 minutes I can come to the end of this. Let us see his poetry about the earth. How does he visualize the earth? Now, he is talking about Spain here. Spain is Chile. Spain is far away from Chile.
Yes.
And Spain is not exactly a good country at that point of time. Chile then was, but later on it also came under dictatorship. But then this is what Spain was. Spain not is. Spain is not like that in the 20th century. But there was a time, and even then there were problems. Taut and dry Spain was. Now see the comparison. A day's drum of dull sound. A plain, an eagle's eyrie, a silence below the lashing weather. This is what Spain was. That's the earth, that's the ground, that's the culture that Spain was. All that is hard. You just sit there and you start feeling pain. You sit there and you start feeling ripped apart. Which is taut. Taut means it is just stretched. And dry Spain was a day's drum of dull sound. See the simile. Spain is a drum, and that drum also is of the day. In the day drum, they say day drums are generally not very good. In the evening you dance, in the morning you might have some other, you get up and all. But during the day, the drum, and it's giving the dull sound. That is what Spain was. A plain and eagle eyrie, a silence below the lashing weather. The entire country is under the lashing weather, lashing and the lashing leather, I believe, and which means that there is a kind of violence there in Spain, and he is talking about it. So, viewers, we have had the feeling of reality, the feeling of honest perception in the hands of Neruda as a poet of commitment, and this poet was in love with human beings, was in love with nature, was a supporter of happiness and harmony, and when he didn't see it happening in front of him, then he would talk about it in honest terms. So I would say as a part of the conclusion that people like Neruda, who in translation also can move us so much, imagine how much he would have moved his own audience in the original Spanish language. So we have this voice of commitment. He has moved and influenced generations all over the world in the 20th century. And if you can think of 4 or 5 great poets of the 20th century, then Neruda is supposed to be absolutely central in that group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Prakash, and thank you all for joining us for this session and getting a great insight into this Spanish poet Neruda, and hope you have get a picture about what kind of writing Neruda has, what or sort of emotions he had together. Friends, if you have any questions regarding this session or any suggestions, you may write into us on our email ID. For that, please note our email ID, which is info.cec@nic.in. Thank you for joining us for this part of the lecture, and we'll meet you with some new poet or some new world literature with Professor Prakash. Thank you all.